To a special edition of Shattering Myths. I say special not in the grandiose connotation of the word, but we're going to try to cobble together the best we can a show today. I am currently broadcasting from Central California, and we have been deluged with a storm. Both heavy rains and high winds, and so I have lost internet connectivity, which is how we connect to the GCN studios, and I have lost power, which means that I am completely blind today as we attempt to bring you the show. But I'd prefer not to have to go to an archive today because we have IQ al-Rassooli on today, and the issues in the Islamic world are very significant, and they're growing worse, and I never want to squander the opportunity to have our listeners be able to benefit from what IQ al-Rassooli knows. IQ, are you with us? I don't hear IQ. I can't connect him to make him live, but Tom, can you arrange that for us?
I can hear you very clearly.
Okay, great, IQ. IQ is the author of Lifting the Veil, The True Faces of Muhammad and Islam, having written what may be the most comprehensive, contextual, and best documented analysis of Islam, and knowing the religion inside and out. I can tell you without equivocation that IQ al-Rassooli is the single best informed and most articulate and courageous spokesperson in the world as it relates to this menace that is Islam. IQ, you were born in Iraq, correct?
Correct.
And this morning I saw that there was another great travesty in Iraq. Some 50 people were killed and hundreds more were mutilated by Islamic terrorists. Is that news accurate?
It's accurate, yes. I mean, almost every single day, a minimum of 30 people are blown up. That's excluding the people who get mutilated, as you said.
Now, the people that were blown up, as I read through the news today, it struck me that this case was like so many others. It was principally Shia civilians that were blown up, and that the bombs were placed for the most part in and around markets and just business districts. Is that also true?
That's true. The Sunnis are blowing them up. The Shia are blowing the Sunnis, and the Sunnis are blowing the Shia. A very peaceful religion, of course.
Of course. Now, as it relates to the carnage that is taking place in Iraq, and we have talked about this before, did this kind of terrorism exist during the time that Saddam Hussein was the dictator over the country?
No, not under Saddam Hussein, not under Gaddafi, and not under Mubarak.
So in all of these cases, even with Assad in Syria, the dictators were universally opposed to fundamentalist Islamic organizations, and therefore had a very effective way at precluding Islamic terrorist attacks.
In fact, there were very, very, and I mean minute number of attacks under all of these four leaders. Yes. So no terrorist attacks.
So it really is the case that in Iraq, for example, for America to say that it's fighting a war against terrorism when it invaded Iraq, what it did is it eliminated one of the world's most effective rulers against Islamic terrorism, and as a result of that, of doing so, has subjected Iraq to tens of thousands, if not now perhaps 100,000 terrorist deaths.
Yes, but that's not only Iraq, as you said. Also in Egypt, what happened happening now.
Yes.
The dismemberment of Libya and the complete collapse of Syria.
You know, it's interesting that in Egypt, when the Muslim Brotherhood was popularly elected, winning 65% of the vote, first I suspect that occurred because the imams told the women who were given the opportunity to vote that you either vote for the candidate we tell you to vote for, which would be the most conservative, fundamentalist Muslim, or Allah will see to it that you're tortured forever in hell. And the men were told the same thing, and so since most Muslims are dumbed down to the point that they're not nearly as smart as my pet Labrador, they did what they were told. And the Muslim Brotherhood, though, empowered, perpetrated far fewer terrorist acts than we're now witnessing under the military junta.
Yes, but the reason is simple. The military junta is confronted by the Muslim Brotherhood. So, of course, under the Muslim Brotherhood, you wouldn't have terrorists. They are the terrorists themselves.
And as I understand it, though, the attacks, particularly on Christian churches in Egypt, have escalated geometrically now that the Sisi military government is empowered.
Well, it started before. It really started before, to be fair. There was no chance in hell, after the collapse of the secular government of Mubarak, that the Christians will survive. No chance. Islamic fundamentalism, what we call Islamic fundamentalism, is all over the world now. Even as we speak, Indonesia, Malaysia, all of them are they are actually putting in Sharia law.
Speaking of Sharia law, I read an article yesterday afternoon that the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, ISIS, is imposing Sharia on Christians and communities that they have conquered. And the news reports from those Christian areas is that the Muslims who are fundamentalists have gone and said to the Christians, here are the rules that you will have to live with under. If you wish to stay a Christian and not convert to Islam, then we are demanding a substantial tribute in gold. You cannot build... Pardon?
That's the jizya. The jizya.
Yes, yes.
For 1,400 years they've been imposing it upon Christians, Jews, Zoroastrians, and Indians.
So the deal here is that the article made it sound like, well, this was just ISIS. They're a whacked-out extremist fundamentalist group. This has nothing to do with Islam. This is just their craziness. What you're saying is that the demand for the meager wealth that Christians in Syria would have and payment in gold for their lives, for them to be able to survive, is part and parcel of Islam and finds itself even in the Quran.
Well, it is in the Quran. I mean, there's nothing strange about what you and I talk about. Everything you and I talk about is in the Quran. The only difference is you and I have read it and studied it, and 99% of humanity hasn't. That's the only difference.
Yeah, that's your point is valid. The next thing they said is that if you do not surrender your wealth to us and you wish to continue to be a Christian, then we will kill you.
Yes. Of course, but they've been doing that for 1,400 years. There's nothing strange of what's happening today. The only difference is you have the internet, and you have instant communication, and you can see it on television. Before, you couldn't do that.
So this choice that Muslims are offering the non-Muslims in Syria when they gain the upper hand on them, because the Christians are not engaged in this fight. They aren't on either side. Their sentiments, of course, are with Assad, but they're not engaged in the fight. They're not picking up arms, even to defend themselves. This plight that's being imposed on them by the Islamic jihadists is the same plight that would be applied to all Christians anywhere in the world if these jihadists were to gain a foothold in any country.
But I just said the jihadists don't have to gain any foothold. Indonesia is not jihadist country. Malaysia is not jihadist country. Brunei is not jihadist country, but they are imposing Sharia because that is exactly what Islam is all about. Under Islam, as you know, humanity are two groups in humanity. Those who are Ahl al-Kitab, that means Christians and Jews, and those who are not. Those who are Ahl al-Kitab, Christians and Jews, they have to pay the jizya. That means they can live, they don't have to convert to Islam, but they pay an onerous tax for not being a Muslim. The other group who are not Ahl al-Kitab, they're not Christians and Jews, like polytheists and pagans, they have only one choice: convert or be slaughtered. That's been going on for 1400 years, nothing is new.
Those Christians or Jews or Hindus that choose to pay the jizya, this onerous tax, do they get any benefits? Should they agree to pay it? Are they considered citizens of that country with all the rights of a normal citizen, the ability to own property, conduct business, go about their lives with the full rights and benefits of a citizen?
No, of course not. They are supposed to pay the jizya in humiliation and degradation. Ladies and gentlemen, just in case somebody is listening and doesn't believe what we're saying. Al-Tawbah, chapter 9, verse 29. Listen to it carefully. Al-Tawbah says, Qatilu, fight, those who believe not in Allah nor the last day, nor hold that forbidden, which has been forbidden by Allah and His Apostle Muhammad, nor acknowledge the religion of truth, Islam, even if they are of the people of the book, Christians and Jews, until they pay the jizya. It's in the Quran. Until they pay the jizya with willing submission and feel themselves humiliated. You and I are not creating these things. This is in the Quran, and anybody who is a fundamentalist Muslim, by the way, fundamentalist Muslim is a person who believes in the Quran and the Sunnah of Muhammad. He has to follow it up. Just to make sure that the listeners understand what I'm saying. Currently, unbelievers represent 80% of humanity, or Christians, Buddhists, Hindus, Jews, atheists, agnostics, etc.
And it doesn't matter if the Muslim is a Sunni or Shia. Shia Muslim means follower, and Sunni means those who value the Sunnah, which is the example of Muhammad, as it's described in the Hadith. Either way, the directions that you have just read in the Quran are the directions that they will impose.
Absolutely. It makes absolutely no difference which sect of Islam, which belief system of Islam. Islam is one and the same, one Quran.
When we return to Shattering Myths, we will discuss this further with IQ al-Rassooli and try to come to an understanding of what that means for our future. We'll be back in a moment. Shattering Myths, we're having a conversation with IQ al-Rassooli. IQ, based upon what you read from the 9th Surah of the Quran, it would seem logical that these kinds of rules would be experienced in the 57 countries around the world that have an Islamic majority, that they're either imposing this horrible tax and imposing this disgusting humiliation and discrimination against non-Muslims and killing those that don't capitulate. But those countries that are not doing it are then in the process of becoming more compliant with Sharia. Is that reasonable?
Yes. That's what's happening. That's exactly what's happening. Everybody used to say, look at Indonesia with 200 million Muslims, how progressive they are. Look at Malaysia, there's no more looking.
Right.
They're all going Sharia.
Right. Including Turkey. I mean, Turkey was the other place. And by the way, there's nothing progressive about Indonesia and Malaysia. They are backward countries. They are vicious countries. There are no freedoms in either of those countries, and they have dealt savagely with their neighbors. You know, the story of East Timor and what has happened there is a great example of how horrific their treatment of minorities have been. Well, they'll willingly and gleefully slaughter 250,000 people. So what you're saying here, IQ, and I think it's important, is that when liberals and politicians and the media et al. Are being supportive of Islam, when they say that we should accept Islam and that Islam is not at fault, what they're doing is they're placing a huge percentage of the world's population under the sword of this horrible menace.
The remarkable thing is this. If a politician was debating with me, in 5 minutes, I will obliterate him off the face of the earth. All I need is 5 verses of the Quran. I have them. There is no chance in hell after the 5 verses that any politician could sit in front of me and say, you're wrong. Impossible.
Right. Even if they had an expert say in Islam quote verses that said otherwise, because it's all fairness, the first 90 surahs of the Quran, those that were revealed in Mecca, are just mean-spirited. It's just a never-ending argument between Muhammad and those who knew him best. And those who knew Muhammad vastly better than anybody today said that he was demon-possessed, that he was a liar, that he was a lowlife, that he was only doing it for sex, power, and money, that Allah never spoke to him, and that he made the whole thing up. And then Muhammad has his wannabe God say, oh boy, we're going to get you. Will you just wait? And the afterlife, there's going to be this dreadful day of doom for you, and we're going to torture you for making fun of our guy. So for the first 90 surahs, it's just this never-ending argument that's at about the level of a couple of bullies in the 5th grade. Would that be reasonable to say?
Very reasonable.
And so all you really have is
ironically, his own tribe, his own kith and kin, they knew he was a pathological liar. They knew he was not a prophet of Allah. They knew it. And the Quran, as you said, the first 90 surahs, he keeps defending himself in the 90 surahs.
Right. And so that's all it is. It's just this lame defense, but the interesting, of course, side is that those who knew Muhammad vastly better than anyone else has ever known him said he was a complete fraud, and he was grotesquely immoral, and that he was lying. Now, that means we only have 24 surahs that reveal anything that is meaningful about Islam. And all of those were revealed in what's called the Islamic era, when Muhammad was booted out of Mecca in shame. He came up with this whole explanation that Satan inspired him, and that what he had said was given to him by Satan, and that all of Allah's messengers speak on behalf of Satan. Imagine he had taken a wild ass ride on a wing. He was drummed out of town, and there was a pledge of Aqaba as he was drummed out of town. Can you share with our listeners what the pledge of Aqaba said and how that began the Islamic era?
The pledge of Aqaba was between Muhammad and 3 of the pagan tribes that lived in the Medina.
Sounds like we're going to have to have this presentation right after the commercial break. I apologize for the interruption, but Pledge of Aqaba is important. Welcome back to Shattering Myths. We're having a conversation with IQ al-Rassooli. This conversation has grown out of a news report that a jihadist group in Syria, that would mean fundamentalist Muslims in Syria, do not think for a moment that jihadists have corrupted their religion. It is the religion of Islam that has turned jihadists into savages. The story is that when ISIS, which is the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, and by way of background, ISIS is a outgrowth of the awakening program that was established in Iraq. IQ, are you familiar with what's called the awakening program, where America's provided guns and ammunition as well as money to Sunni warlords and the militias underneath the Sunni warlords in Iraq?
I heard about it, but I don't know.
Okay. It was the means that General Petraeus used to enable the United States to leave Iraq, and he recognized that the United States had created a huge military presence for the Shia, and that the Shia would seek to abuse the Sunni now that America had empowered the Shia in Iraq. And so under the guise that these Sunni militants and warlords would use their weapons to fight al-Qaeda, which, of course, is a Sunni Islamic terrorist organization and in reality never had a presence in Iraq. We provided all of these weapons, and they were the primary weapons that were used not only to begin this the civil war that is taking place right now in Iraq, but also they were the ones that initially crossed the border from Iraq into Syria and weaponized what had been previously a peaceful protest. And so the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria is an outgrowth of that awakening program. It's American weapons that they're wielding. Now, they stated that their imposition of these rules upon Christians, and there was no negotiation here. They said that it was being implemented under the concept of Dhimma, D-H-I-M-M-A. Can you explain what Dhimma is?
People who are subservient to Islam.
Okay. And he said under that ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, said that it requires Christians to pay a tax of around a half an ounce of pure gold in exchange for their safety. That's a lot of money for a person living in Syria, particularly someone without any rights, isn't it?
It's impossible.
Yeah. Now, what they said is that if the Christians do this, if they pay this, then they won't be killed. But if they don't pay it and they don't convert to Islam, they would be killed. So it's simply extortion. You pay us an exorbitant amount of money, and we will allow you to live, but with no rights. And if you do not pay us this exorbitant amount of money and do not agree to our terms, which is that you cannot be religious in public, we will kill you. Now, that actually began, this attitude of Islam in this regard began with the Pledge of Aqaba, where Muhammad was shamed out of Mecca, again by those who knew him best, his own tribe, his neighbors, forced him to leave because he was a laughingstock. And on the way to Yathrib, today's Medina, he ran into 12 pagan Arabs there and sold them this concept that he was the great Messiah that the Jews in that town had spoken of, and that if they were to fight on behalf of Muhammad, that there would be great rewards for them. You familiar with this Pledge of Aqaba?
Yes, it was between Muhammad and the two pagan tribes, al-Aus and Khazraj. You see, you've got to give the whole background.
Okay.
Medina, or Yathrib, had three very important Jewish tribes. They were not Jews, they were Judaized Arabs. What do I mean by Judaized Arabs? In the peninsula of the Arabs, when Muhammad was born, there were Arabs, indigenous natives, who converted to the religion of Christianity, and there were indigenous native Arabs who converted to the religion of the Jews. In Yathrib, or Medina, there were three tribes, Jewish, and the two pagan tribes, al-Aus and Khazraj. They were not only related as in commerce, they were related also in blood. So the Aus and Khazraj already had the knowledge that the Jews and the Christians are waiting for a Messiah, for a Redeemer. Muhammad pretended that he was the Redeemer for the Arabs. So he told them, listen, guys, if you follow what I tell you to the nth degree, if and when you die, you get to heaven with all the drinks that you want to drink. He prohibited wine on earth, but you have it in death. You can have all the virgins that you want, sex is unlimited for eternity. And if you survive the battles, not battles, in fact the ambushes and ghazwas, then you can take the women of the conquered men and enslave the children and rape them and do anything you want. So it was a win-win situation. Literally, it was a win, and still is a win-win situation. Why would you think a young man,
it's actually lose-lose.
They go on a suicide mission? They're not doing it for Islam. They're not doing it for the Arabs. They're not doing it for Palestine. They're doing it for the 72 virgins. I know it sounds like a laughing matter, but it's not a laughing matter. It's a fact.
No. Yeah. In fact, in Syria, all of the videos when that we see online when an Islamic group, and there are hundreds of them. It's not just al-Nusra and the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, but there's hundreds of these fundamentalist Islamic jihadist groups, all armed to the teeth, that when they capture a community, they run to the rooftops of the houses, raise their flag, shout Allahu Akbar, and then they go down through the house. They rape the women, and they ransack the house, and they steal anything that isn't nailed down under the Quran's 8th surah, which says that stealing is lawful and good. And so this is, it really is a lose-lose scenario. I mean, the scenario that Muhammad offered Muslims, and we should be aware that this is exactly why they are jihadists today, is that they got to keep 20% of everything they get to keep 80% of anything that they stole, so long as they gave 20% to Muhammad and therefore to Islamic establishments. They got to keep 80% of anything they stole while they were terrorists, and if they were killed, they would go directly to what is, in essence, a Nevada brothel with virgins and
it's Muhammad's whorehouse version of paradise.
Right. And from the reason I call that it's not win-win, it's lose-lose, is that anyone who steals for a living, and that's basically how Islam was established. Muhammad was a professional thief, a pirate. Anyone who steals for a living is destroyed. That the goods that they gain through thievery just absolutely destroy their character. There is no satisfaction associated with it. Their lives are miserable. The lives of a thief are always miserable. They're never satisfied with rape. They're never satisfied with plunder or enslaving. And second, it's a lose-lose scenario because Allah's not God. Muhammad wasn't a prophet, and there is no paradise that serves up endless streams of virgins and booze.
Yeah, that's because you know this. That's the difference. They don't know this. They actually believe it. So as far as they're concerned, it's a win-win situation, no matter what you and I say.
Yeah, for example, the suicide bomber, and that's the reason we have this program. That's why we interview you, is because the more people who know this and who deal with reality, the greater the chance is that more Muslims can be awakened to the truth so that they won't perpetrate such heinous acts as we're witnessing in Syria and in Iraq today. The reality here is that a suicide bomber, when an imam tells a suicide bomber that you're so ugly, you're so unpopular, such a loser, that you're never going to get a woman in this life, your only chance of sex is to die as in Allah's cause, that suicide bomber, when they go and kill themselves and other innocent people in a marketplace, say in Iraq, they will actually wrap their private parts in a protective gauze so that when they're blown to bits, it'll still be functional. That's how corrupt and how misguided, how misled they are.
But this is a fact. Not only in Iraq. Almost 70 to 80% of the terrorists captured by Israelis, when they checked them out, they had tin cans where they put their private part in to protect it from the explosion.
Yeah. They actually believed they were going to go directly to Allah and be able to have multiple virgins.
Yeah.
Yes.
By the way,
it's stunning that something that stupid is believed, but it is believed.
doesn't matter if you and I laugh at it. As long as they believe in it, they will act on it. And that's exactly what they're doing. By the way, people who don't know the Quran, another verse is very interesting. Al-Ma'idah 5.51, it says, perfectly clear Arabic. O ye who believe, Muslims, take not the Jews, Yahud, and the Christians, Nasara, for your friends and protectors. They're but friends and protectors to each other. And he amongst you that turns to them for friendship is of them. The last verse, the last part of the verse which says, and he amongst you that turns to them for friendship is of them, means, and you Muslims, any one of you who becomes a friend to a Jew, a Christian, a Buddhist, or a Hindu, or under their control, is an apostate, is an infidel, subject to death and destruction.
And according to the Quran, a Muslim who becomes an infidel, a Muslim who isn't willing to kill in Allah's cause everyone that does not submit to Islam, that in the 9th surah, the Quran actually says that it's those Muslims, former Muslims, now hypocrites, that are going to be tortured by Allah in the hardest places in hell. So if you, for example, are a Muslim and you don't know diddly squat about the hadith of the Quran and you think that Islam is just like any other religion and you're just going along and because you're ignorant of your own religion, no, that's pretty stupid. But let's just say that you are, and there probably are some Muslims that don't know anything about Muhammad, don't know anything about Islam. They just go along because they were born into it. If they're not jihadists, if they're not terrorists, the Quran orders good Muslims to kill them, and Allah hates them. So it's a ultimate lose-lose if you're a peaceful individual, a moderate person, pretending to be a Muslim. All true, right?
Absolutely true.
We'll return with IQ al-Rassooli after the commercial break. Shattering Myths. We're having a discussion with IQ al-Rassooli. I think, IQ, as you were positioning everything associated with the background necessary for folks to understand the Pledge of Aqaba, that I also interrupted you there. So I'd like you to finish your thought and then complete the nature of this Pledge of Aqaba.
See, it was very easy for two pagan tribes who are really knowledgeable, not knowledgeable in the Bible, but they knew that the Jews or Judaized Arabs and the Christian Arabs were expecting the arrival of a man who is a Messiah, a Redeemer. Muhammad told them that he himself is that promised Messiah, but for the Arabs, not for the Christian or the Jews. And they accepted it. And he promised them, he said, if you follow exactly what I tell you, no matter what it is, and that's what the Quran is all about, no matter what it is.
Mm-hmm.
If I tell you to go to die, you go and die. Because when you die fighting, you will go to heaven with all the 72 virgins, unlimited drink, unlimited food, pleasures, anything for eternity. And if you survive the battle, and you are the winners, you take the women to rape them, and the plunder, 80% as you said, and you take the children and sell them for slaves to slavery. So it is a win-win from their point of view, not our point of view. A win-win, no question about it. I mean, otherwise, how can you imagine a young man at the prime of their life willing to blow themselves up, believing? That's the tragedy. They actually believe, because as you said, 98% of Muslims have never read the Quran properly, and they know nothing about the Bible. 98%. Why? Out of 1,500 million Muslims, 1,200 million don't speak Arabic, don't understand Arabic, don't read Arabic. So you've got 300 million. Out of 300 million, you've got only 30% who are literate. That's 90 million out of 1,900 million. And most of them don't actually read and study the Quran. As you said, they listen to the Imam. And the Imam tells them exactly what to think.
Right. It's really not a lot different than Roman Catholicism during the medieval period, where
exactly
where you either go to the Roman Catholic Church or you're branded a heretic, a witch, or and you're tortured and killed, or you go there and you're illiterate, you can't read anything. There's no copies to read anyway, and they tell you what to believe. They tell you that they're empowered and that they're in control, and you are subject to their whims, and to not comply with whatever they want is to be killed. And that's the nature of almost every Islamic country.
We had, that was the time of the Dark Ages, the Dark Middle Ages. It was dark because nobody was literate. But in Islam, even the literate ones are in the Dark Ages.
Yeah. It is amazing how poisonous this religion is, and how people who are literate and can actually read the Quran believe it. There really is no difference, IQ, between my book, Prophet of Doom, and Qutb, who's wrote Signposts Along the Way and In the Shade of the Quran. He's the academic leader, if you will, of the Muslim Brotherhood, the wellspring from which all terrorist organizations have sprung. His books on the Quran and on the Hadith draw from exactly the same sources. The only difference is that I'm rational and recognize that everything that the Quran and Hadith says is grotesquely immoral and irrational, and he believes it.
Yes. As I said, it's the most remarkable thing. They cannot be enlightened. This is why 1,500 million followers of Muhammad are the least productive, least inventive, and least creative in human history.
And they're not only, no, of course not. Those are the facts. That is the evidence. There is no denying that. Although you get an idiot like the President of the United States who will talk about the great religion that is Islam and all of the great Islamic achievements, and there are none. There literally are none. The only period of time where Islam even could be considered great by powerful standards, it was only great because it plundered most of the world and brought all of the wealth that it had stolen from the world back to the coffers of Islam. And I don't consider that great.
No.
That would be like calling...
They are the ones who claim all the time that the concept of the zero was theirs, when the concept of the zero and the beginnings of algebra were started by the Indians.
Of course. Yeah, even Arabic numbers are actually a derivative of the Hebrew alphabet. Even the basis of the Quran, which they claim is pure Arabic, it happens to be Hebrew. Every claim by Islam is false.
It's false.
We'll be back.
It's false. It's false.
Yeah.